What's up, brothers and sisters? It's your brother G World 7_D. Here's another book I have. It's called History of Alabama, and incidentally of Georgia and Mississippi from the earliest period, Volume 1. Now let's read this book. Let's read something in this book that you need to pick up on. Position myself here, dropping stuff, and I continue to try to seek out great information for you to go do your own research. Okay, I'm going to turn to page 131 in this book. Alright, here I go. In the spring of 1700, Ibenville, in company with a few of his colonial people, visited the Natchez. While there, one of the temples was consumed by lightning. The priest implored the women to cast their children in the flames to appease the anger of their divinity. Before the French, by prayers and entreaties, could arrest this horrible proceeding, some of the innocent babies were already roasting in the flames. At this time, the Natchez, reduced by wars and by death of the nobility, upon who decrease the existence of many others terminated, did not exceed a population of 1,200. Fort Roselli, erected by the French in 1716 upon the bluff which sustained the city of Natchez, had a garrison of soldiers and numerous citizens. On the morning of the 28th November, 1729, the great sun and his warriors suddenly fell upon them, and before noon the whole male population were in the sleep of death. The women, children, and slaves were reserved as prisoners of war. The consternation was great throughout the colony when this horrible massacre became known. The French and the Choctaw united and drove the Natchez upon the lower Washita, just below the mouth of the little river. Here the latter erected mounds and embankments for defense. Here the latter erected mounds and embankments for defense. Here the latter erected mounds and embankments for defense, which covered an area of 400 acres. In the meantime, having obtained assistance from France, the colonists marched against the stronghold, and in January 1733 made a successful attack. They captured the Great Sun, several of the war chiefs, and 427 of the tribe, where they were sent from New Orleans to Santo Domingo as slaves. I repeat, the Great Sun, several of the warrior chiefs, and 427 of the tribe, who were sent from New Orleans to Santo Domingo as slaves. The remainder of the tribe made their escape. Some of them sought asylum among the Chickasaw and Creeks, while others scattered in the far west. Go on even further. The Choctaw and the Chickasaw. The Choctaw and the Chickasaw descended from a people called the Chickasaws, who were among the first inhabitants of the Mexican Empire. At an ancient period, they began to wander towards the east. In the company with the Choctaws, After a time they reached the Mississippi River and crossed it, arriving in this country with an aggregate force of 10,000 warriors. The Choctaws established themselves upon the headwaters of the Yazoo, the Chickasaws upon the northwestern sources of the Tombigbee, and the Choctaws upon the territory now embraced in southern Mississippi and southwestern Alabama. They thus gradually became three distinct tribes, but the Chickasaws and the Choctaws were generally known by the name of the former, while the Choctaws spoke the same language, with the exception of a difference produced by intonation of the voice. Upon the first settlement of Mobile by the French, they found that the Choctaws and the remnants of the Mobilians employed the same language. Indeed, we have seen that the great Mobilian chief in 1540 had a name which was derived from two well-known Choctaw words, Tuska, which is warrior, and Lusa, black. I repeat, Tuska, warrior, Lusa, black, means black warrior. Tuscaloosa, Alabama was named after damn Negro. Okay? It was named after nigger. Roll Tide. I repeat, Roll Tide. The Indians who fought DeSoto, Cabusto upon the warrior, and who had extended their lines 6 miles and down its western banks to oppose its crossing, where the Palafalias, they are believed to have been no other people than the Choctaws. There is a word in the language of the later called the Falaya, long. It is scarcely necessary to remind the reader that the the Chickasaws were living in the upper part of Mississippi when DeSoto invaded it, and that they fought him with great courage. Now, as the Choctaws, according to tradition, came with them to this country and were portion of the same family, it is reasonable to suppose that the Falayas, the brave allies of Tuscaloosa, the black warrior, were the Choctaws, especially when taken in connection with collateral evidence in our possession. The tradition of the migration of the Chickasaws and the Choctaws from the Mexican Empire has been preserved by the former alone, while the latter, with few exceptions, have lost it. On the road leading from St. Stephen's in Alabama to the city of Jackson, Mississippi, was, some years ago, a large mound embracing at the base about 2 acres and 40 feet high in a conical form, and enclosed by a ditch encompassing 20 acres. On the top of it was a deep hole, 10 feet in circumference, out of which the ignorant portion of the Choctaws believed that their ancestors once sprung as thick bees. People in the whole of that part of the country. I'm going to stop there, man. I'm going to stop there. It's in the history of Alabama. And incidentally of Georgia and Mississippi from the earliest period, volume 1. There's 2 volumes of this book that I know of, man. Let me tell you something now. That you heard the term what I said, prisoners of war. You also heard the term about taking slaves from New Orleans to Santo Domingo. This is what's being done to our people. And I showed you pictures of the Chickasaw and the Choctaw before. Those are freaking Negroes, man. And it talks about them coming from Mexico. I mentioned this over and over again. Brothers and sisters were migrating from... It wasn't no dividing line like we have today, where this is the United States and this is a separate country, Mexico. It was based on the empires and how far the empire reach was going. So you had some of the empires were here in what we call North America now, and then some stretched over into Central America. This is how these empires roamed and ran. And a lot of the black people, some of them were captured as slaves, but then some of them migrated and amalgamated with other tribes. This is our history, man. Stop listening to Umar Johnson. Stop listening to that clown, Mestizo, Angel Miss Jordan. Stop listening to that goofball, that little goofy light-skinned Negro, Sarah Sudusetti, the Amara Squad. If you listen to these Negroes, most of them are immigrants, man. They do not speak for our people. Do not have these Negroes speak for you, man. This is our real history right here. Continue to study your history. I'm going to continue to give you sources, man. This is volume 1 of a 2-volume book. Learn your goddamn history, man. Peace, G-World.